Asuka wins Tiffany Stratton backstage WWE Raw. Tiffany Stratton just got a lesson that nobody in WWE has been able to teach her until right now. And the lesson did not happen in a ring. It did not happen in the polished, referee-monitored, camera-position environment that Tiffany Stratton has learned to master. It happened backstage, in the real estate of Raw that does not have a controlled atmosphere or a prepared crowd or the specific safety nets that the in-ring environment provides to people who know how to use them. Asuka found her backstage. And what Asuka found when she found her is what everyone who has been watching Tiffany Stratton ascend through WWE with the specific combination of talent and manufactured invulnerability that has defined her recent run was wondering not if someone would eventually puncture that invulnerability, but when, and whether the person who did it would be equal to the task of making it stick. Asuka was equal to the task. More than equal. She was the exact and only right person for this specific moment and this specific lesson in the wrestling world that has been watching Tiffany Stratton operate without genuine consequence for longer than her own ability warranted is going to have complicated feelings about how the lesson was delivered and why it landed the way it did. Because here is what makes the Asuka vs Tiffany Stratton backstage situation on Raw so much larger than a standard confrontation between two performers on opposite trajectories. Asuka is not a performer who does things accidentally. She is not a performer whose emotional responses to other people's behavior produce actions without deliberation first. The Empress of Tomorrow, and the title still applies even at this stage of her career, perhaps especially at this stage, does not expend effort on people who are not worth the expenditure. She does not direct attention at targets that are not worth the attention. Asuka going backstage for Tiffany Stratton on Raw is a selection, a deliberate, considered, personally motivated selection of the one person in the current women's division landscape who represents something specific enough to Asuka, a specific kind of problem, a specific kind of wrong note in the environment she operates in that addressing it stopped being optional. The wrestling world needs to understand exactly what that selection means, and this video is going to explain it. Let's start with Tiffany Stratton because you cannot fully appreciate what Asuka winning backstage means without fully understanding what Tiffany Stratton has been building in the months leading to this moment and the specific quality of that building that eventually made someone of Asuka's caliber decide that personal intervention was necessary. Tiffany Stratton is talented. This needs to be said clearly and without qualification because the most nuanced analysis of her situation is not served by understating the genuine quality that exists underneath everything else. She is physically gifted in ways that the camera amplifies rather than creates. The athleticism is real, the natural ability in a wrestling environment is real, the competitive instinct that produces the right decisions in the right moments under pressure is real. She belongs at the level she has reached. The problem, and there is a problem, which is what made Asuka's intervention not just inevitable but necessary, is what Tiffany Stratton has built around the genuine talent. The scaffolding. The specific performance of invulnerability that a performer sometimes constructs around their actual ability and that, over time, begins to require maintenance that the actual ability cannot always provide. Tiffany Stratton's recent behavior in the women's division has carried a specific quality that veterans of this industry recognize from experience. The quality of someone who has decided that her current level of success is a statement about her fundamental superiority rather than a reflection of her current competitive positioning. The quality of someone who has begun treating the people around her not as colleagues at the same level of a shared profession but as extras in a narrative that centers her exclusively. The quality of someone who has never quite received the specific, physical, immediately real correction that this industry eventually delivers to everyone who gets too far ahead of their actual place in its hierarchy. Asuka is the correction. The specific way Tiffany Stratton has been operating on Raw, the dismissiveness toward performers whose experience and credibility exceeds hers, the specific brand of performance arrogance that is different from competitive confidence in ways that matter, the sense that she has concluded the questions about her standing before those questions have been fully answered, all of it accumulated into the specific situation where Asuka finding her backstage stopped being a reaction to a single, provocative moment and became the accumulated weight of an entire pattern arriving at its logical conclusion. Here is what the people who are covering the Asuka vs Tiffany Stratton backstage situation on Raw are not getting right. They are covering it as a veteran making a point to a younger performer. As the established standard bearer of the division reminding someone who is getting ahead of herself what the actual standard looks like when it is held by someone who has earned it without question. That reading is partially accurate, but it is missing the specific thing about Asuka in this moment that makes the backstage win so much more significant than a veteran lesson delivered to a talented upstart. Asuka in 2026 is a performer who has nothing left to prove in the conventional sense. The career she has built, the championships, the undefeated streaks, the matches that have defined eras of the women's division, the specific kind of in-ring brilliance that operates in a register no other performer has fully accessed is complete enough that anything she adds to it now is addition, not foundation. She is not backstage looking for Tiffany Stratton because she needs this for her career. She is looking for her because she wants this. Because the specific thing Tiffany Stratton represents in the current women's division landscape has produced something in Asuka that her default state does not typically produce. Personal investment. Asuka operating with personal investment rather than professional investment is a categorically different thing. Professional investment produces performance. brilliant, technically flawless, ring general level performance that is the best in any environment where it occurs. Personal investment produces something rawer, something less choreographed, something that does not care about the craft of the delivery because the craft is not the point. The point is the thing underneath the craft that the craft is usually the vehicle for. Tiffany Stratton produced the personal investment. That is the specific mistake she made in the weeks leading to Raw tonight. Not the provocation of Asuka as a competitor that would have produced a professional response, measured and devastating in its own way, but the provocation of Asuka as a person, as a standard, as the representative of something that the women's division has been and that Tiffany Stratton, through her specific conduct, has been suggesting no longer matters. That provocation produced the backstage win. And a backstage win produced by personal investment from Asuka is not a competitive result. It is a statement about what Asuka values, about what she is willing to move toward rather than wait for, about what she considers sufficiently important to her sense of the world she operates in to address directly when the appropriate channels fail to address it at the speed and completeness that the situation requires. Let's talk about where this happened because the backstage location of Asuka's win over Tiffany Stratton is not a production detail. It is the most important narrative choice in the entire encounter. WWE's backstage environment is the space where the professional performance gives way to something closer to the actual operating reality of the institution. It is the space where the cameras are present but not always positioned, where the lighting is functional rather than atmospheric, where the production values communicate working environment rather than entertainment product. It is the space that feels most like what the wrestling world actually is rather than what it presents itself as to the audience. Asuka chose to address Tiffany Stratton in that space. Not in the ring, where the confrontation would have the full weight of the performance apparatus behind it. Not in a segment designed to give both parties the structured space to express themselves in ways the audience can follow with the support of commentary and camera work and pacing that the in-ring environment provides. Backstage, where the encounter is immediate and physical and personal in a way that the in-ring environment, for all its genuine high stakes, sometimes is not. The choice of backstage is the choice of making this personal rather than professional. Of telling Tiffany Stratton and everyone watching that this is not about their programs or their championship standings or any of the competitive structures that the on-screen product organizes itself around. This is about something more specific than any of that. Something that the ring environment which is shared equally by both performers, which gives both performers equal structural access to the performance apparatus cannot express with the specificity this situation required. Backstage gives Asuka home advantage in a sense that the ring cannot, because backstage is where Asuka operates on her own terms entirely. Where there is no referee to impose structure, no ring to provide an environment with shared rules, no camera crew positioned to capture the moment with the full production value of a planned segment. Just Asuka, in the institution she has inhabited for years, addressing a situation that the institution should have addressed itself and did not address quickly enough. The backstage win is Asuka doing what the institution was not doing. And that, too, is a statement. The Asuka backstage win over Tiffany Stratton is not something that happened in a vacuum. It happened in an environment populated by other women who have their own history with both performers and their own observations about the dynamic that produced tonight's result. The women of Raw who have watched Tiffany Stratton's ascent who have been adjacent to the specific conduct that accumulated into Asuka's personal investment are not a monolithic group in their response to tonight. The specific reactions vary by individual and by experience and by each performer's own relationship with the competitive and interpersonal dynamics of the division. But there is a thread that runs through the reactions of the most experienced performers on that roster. A specific kind of recognition. The recognition that comes from watching an institution self-correct in the way that it is supposed to self-correct but does not always self-correct in time or in the right way. The recognition of watching someone apply the standard that the veteran community of any workplace maintains collectively, the standard that says certain behaviors have certain consequences and the consequences arrive from the people who care most about the standard rather than from the institutional mechanisms that are supposed to enforce it. Asuka is the standard tonight. And the women of Raw's roster, whatever their individual relationship with either performer, whatever their own assessment of the specific dynamics that produce this, understand what it means when Asuka decides something is worth moving toward. When the Empress of Tomorrow steps out of the operating mode that her career's completion has largely settled into and into something more active, more engaged, more personally motivated, it means the thing she moved toward was genuinely worth moving toward. Tiffany Stratton, to many people in that locker room, was genuinely worth moving toward. And Asuka moving toward her is the most complete validation available of that assessment. Here is where the story goes from the event that already happened to the story that is still being written. And the most important author of that next chapter is not Asuka. Asuka has written her part, clearly, decisively, with the full weight of everything she is and everything she represents. The most important author of what happens next is Tiffany Stratton. And the decision she is going to make, the specific way she processes what happened backstage on Raw tonight and what she chooses to do with it, is the most consequential career decision she has faced since she arrived at the main roster level. She has two paths. The first path is the one that the specific personality she has constructed in this chapter of her career would most naturally suggest. The path of escalation. Of treating the backstage loss as an act of aggression that requires a proportional response. Of directing the considerable competitive resources available to her, the physical talent, the athletic gifts, the backing of whatever alliances she has in the current women's division landscape at Asuka, with the specific goal of proving tonight was an anomaly. The second path is the one that this experience was designed to produce. The path that the most important defeats always produce in the people who are capable of receiving what defeat is actually offering. The path of recalibration. Of understanding that what Asuka did backstage on Raw tonight was not an attack. It was information. Specifically, the information that the conduct that produced the personal investment, the behavior that made Asuka decide something needed addressing, has a real cost. That the scaffolding around the talent has been visible to people whose opinion matters. And that the talent itself, properly expressed without the scaffolding, is capable of producing something significantly better than what it has been producing. Which path Tiffany Stratton takes determines everything about what she becomes. And the wrestling world is watching. Asuka vs. Tiffany Stratton at WrestleMania. Built from the foundation that tonight's backstage confrontation laid, is a program with the specific emotional architecture that the biggest stage demands. Both parties now have something to prove that is personal rather than simply competitive. Both parties have a stake in the result that goes beyond the championship or the title that hangs above the match. Asuka has proven she is willing to engage with this specific problem directly and personally. Tiffany Stratton has the specific motivation that only a public loss, a loss that happened in front of people, that has been witnessed, that exists on the record of the shared experience of everyone in that building and everyone watching, can produce. The combination of those two motivations, given the appropriate build and the appropriate stage, produces a WrestleMania match that the women's division of Raw has genuinely needed. Not just a good match. Not just a competitive match with a clean result that advances someone's championship standing. A match with meaning. A match where the result says something beyond itself. A match where the people watching feel, when it is over, that something real was decided. Tonight's backstage win was the first word of that sentence. WrestleMania is where the sentence ends. Asuka won backstage on Raw. Tiffany Stratton received a lesson that nobody else on the roster had been willing or able to deliver. And the story this started is one of the most emotionally loaded programs in the women's division heading into WrestleMania season. I need every take in the comments right now. Was Asuka justified in going backstage for Tiffany Stratton, or did the situation call for a different kind of response? Does Tiffany Stratton take path 1 or path 2 from here, and which path do you most want to see? And the question I need this entire community to answer immediately is: Asuka vs. Tiffany Stratton the most important women's program heading into WrestleMania season, and if they meet on the grandest stage, who wins? Drop every word in the comments. Share this video immediately with every wrestling fan you know, because the Asuka and Tiffany Stratton dynamic is the most compelling interpersonal story in the women's division right now, and this community needs to be driving that conversation. Subscribe to Wrestling News CC and activate every notification, because what comes next in this program is going to move fast and demand your attention the moment it breaks. Asuka found Tiffany Stratton backstage. She delivered the lesson. She won. And the most interesting